Wednesday, everybody. My name's Aaron. I'm the co-founder, managing director here at BWG Connect, giant networking knowledge sharing group. I kicked this off 7.5 years ago now. It's pretty crazy. Just out of this idea that I just wanted to get a big collection of brands together that I could chat with, that we could identify the biggest pain points, strategies, and then the partners that were working and weren't. So we do close to, I don't know, 250 webinars a year. We try to do 100 small format dinners. We have a full day event in New York City on 12/12. If you're there, ping somebody on my team and we'll get you signed up. And I think, one of these things that's popped up over and over again is profitability. And by over and over again, I think it is the number one driver of all the conversations I'm having right now. I try to talk digital strategy with 20 to 30 brands a week. And that is what's driving it over and over again. And so it's in those conversations how we get a couple of things. Number one, the topics for our calls. Number two is, hey, who are those people that our brands in the network are using and are saying, hey, they're awesome, they're the resident experts. And so we have Hannah here today from the Hawkers Club. They're helping tons of brands out in the network in a variety of ways. I would encourage you to follow up with her afterwards. And the title for this is From Root Causes to Recovery, Solving Vendor Shortages on Amazon. And so I think a lot of people have this issue right now. I think it is a revenue stream for Amazon as a whole. It's a profit center, I think, for them. But they are also, they give the money back when everything's done the right way. And so couple things as we get started. We kick this off at like 3 to 4 minutes after the hour. We're going to end before 2:30 p.m. Eastern time as well. So if you're looking at your watch, just know we're going to get done before we go a full hour. The other thing is we want this to be as educational and informational as possible. At any point in time, if you have any questions, drop them into the chat, drop them into the Q&A, and we will get those answered. And I'm going to actually turn on the chat right now so everybody can jump in. So while I'm doing that, though, Hannah, do you want to jump in, like brief background on yourself? The Hawkers Club would be great, and then we'll jump into the conversation. Sound good?
Yeah, sure. Cool. So as you can probably tell, I've got a British accent. I started my career in London as an auditor for PwC. So I love data. However, did not like working 80 hours trolling through someone else's accounts. So I decided that it would be more fun to go and work at Amazon. At Amazon, I was an in-stock manager focused on profitability rather than on kind of keeping the products in stock. So is this unit profitable for Amazon? Does it have a right to be in the FCs? And then the now much hated bulk buy tool that you will see on Vendor Central. That is a Frankenstein version of what was supposed to be a very cool way to make sure we had enough stock. And then I finished my career at Amazon, launching Amazon Australia as the in-stock manager. And about 7 years ago now, myself and a business partner from Amazon set up our agency, starting about kind of Amazon ads and then consulting and then moving a lot more into the whole profitability, financial, like making sure that Amazon's paying you correctly space.
Awesome. And a quick reminder, as we jump into this, drop question to the chat, drop into the Q&A, and we'll get them answered as real time as possible. I mean, so there's a bunch of stuff that I want to go through, but let's kick it off here. There's fines, there's fees, there's chargebacks, there's all these different things. Can you like break a few of those down, and then if we go right into vendor shortages and what that looks like, and then we'll just do that deep dive. But I want to kind of like level set. I mean, you and I did this podcast. We can probably put the link in there a while back, and you totally blew my mind on the additional ways that Amazon's doing it, grabbing some of these dollars. But could you break us down a few of those different ways, and then we'll kind of end with the vendor shortages, and we'll do a deep dive on it.
Yeah, sure. So the first way, well, this is kind of all ways where Amazon is either not paying you enough or they are taking funds from you. Sometimes they'll do it completely correctly. That's great. A lot of the times they'll make mistakes. The issue is that it's not clear which is which. So the first thing is they're going to take money from you in terms of your co-op. So that's your freight, your damages, your marketing allowance. Some people have a margin agreement with Amazon known as a GMM. Some people have an AVS, SVS. The next way that you'll see funds come off your account is in the place of audits. So these are audits that could be potentially on your co-op, it could be potentially on subscribe and save, it could be on if Amazon thinks you've priced incorrectly, it could be the ominous H1, H2 audits where it's not always clear actually why they're taking money. Then after that, you've got your chargebacks and fines, and that is where you've done something that essentially breaks Amazon's rules. So potentially you didn't submit your ASN correctly. Maybe you had boxing issues. Maybe a label got ripped in transit. And that is where Amazon levies a fine against you saying, no, this is what we laid out. This is what we were expecting. We didn't get what we were expecting, so we're going to charge you. The flip side of fines, though, is incentives, which a lot of people forget about, which is if you do the right thing in the right time, Amazon will give you an incentive to do that. So if you, as an example, added SIOC packaging back when Amazon first asked for it, they would give $2 a unit as an incentive for doing that. However, I mean, they say they will. Sometimes you have to go and ask and say, hey, where's my incentive? Then the next one is everything around pricing claims. So sometimes Amazon will say, hey, you charged the incorrect price on the invoice than what we were expecting. And then sometimes they'll say, oh, we actually paid you 2 different prices for the same ASIN in this one day. So we're going to take the lower of the costs. That's the whole pricing claim part of it. And that a lot of brands actually, they just see that they haven't been paid the amount that they were expecting. So they see that as a shortage, but it's different. It's got to be addressed differently. And then the last one is the shortages. And that is where you've invoiced Amazon for the goods. And then they say, for whatever reason, we can't locate these goods. We didn't get these goods. You sent the wrong ASIN. So we're not going to pay your invoice.
Again, it's awesome. Everybody listening and like, there's a whole podcast on this. Also, if you'd like Hannah to just kind of do a recap, a deep dive afterwards, more than happy to connect you with her. They'll do a full blown audit and go through all of that again. But it always blows my mind how many different things there are out there. But let's jump into the shortages side of the house for this, and maybe we end up doing like a whole series of these as a whole. And just as a note, everybody, we're gonna put this a recording of this up on YouTube, so you can go find it. We're building out a page there, so all of our past recordings and future ones will drop on there too, so you can go back and rewatch if there's anything you missed. Um, but let's start off like, what are the most common causes of shortages in Vendor Central, and then how do they typically impact vendors? And then let's just keep rolling through this conversation again. If you have questions on your own, you put them in the chat or put them in the Q&A and we'll get them answered. But let's start with like the most common causes of shortages.
Yeah. So I'll go through the most common causes, but what I would say at the beginning is that a lot of the times people will first say that's not happening to us. And I always say, keep an open mind, investigate it, because sometimes you could be feeling like you're doing everything correctly. And then for whatever reason, it doesn't line up with Amazon's expectations. And then that's why it becomes a shortage. So the first one is mislabeling. That's when something is potentially got the incorrect label of the incorrect UPC, incorrect EAN, but actually more commonly than that, it's incorrect size of label. It is incorrect side of the product that the label is on. Essentially anything to do with the label where it's not exactly to Amazon specifications that causes the product to be pulled out of line. And when I say line, imagine it's coming out of the back of the truck, it's going down the kind of Amazon's rollers, which is always the happy singing Q4 advert, and then all of a sudden it scans, it doesn't scan correctly. Amazon says, okay, we're going to pull the shipment off. We don't have time for this. We're going to put it to the side of the warehouse in these kind of metal storage area. We're going to keep scanning everything else, and we'll get to this when we get to it. So that's the first kind of, this is probably going to become a shortage, because when they get to it varies by FC, it varies by time of year. The first thing that can cause that is mislabeling.
So I want to jump into that just a little. If we pull that just a little bit, as I'm thinking about just, formally having a Vendor Central account, especially in Q4, like this is an audit you need to do right now. You probably needed to do it 3 months ago. I mean, we're right, because we're getting to a cutoff date here, because it can hit the floor, and if they're setting it off to the side, it's not in stock on shelf in a FC. Like that's huge, right? That's huge. I would go do this audit because I agree with you. It's like, hey, yeah, we got all the right information. We're putting it all on there. If it's the wrong size or if it's not in the right spot, so it can't get scanned, major issue. Awesome. Yeah.
And
Okay.
the big thing during Q4 is if something becomes a shortage in Q4 and you're one of the brands that Amazon can return to, there have been instances where something can sit in the side of the warehouse unscanned during Q4. You're worried about getting paid for your shortage. But what happens is come Jan 1, Amazon say, oh yeah, we scanned it in, we've got the goods. Actually, though, we don't need them anymore. We're going to return them. So sometimes a shortage can easily become a return when it's due to labeling issues.
Awesome.
The next one is packaging, and this is an interesting one that not a lot of people think about, but anything bagged, the bag has to be as opaque as possible. So one other thing with the scanning is Amazon will take the first barcode that they scan. So if you, for example, have an inner pack and a case pack, if the inner pack is scannable, Amazon will just take that one if it happens to hit the scanner first. There is no, oh, this is not what we were expecting. It's okay, we found a scannable barcode, we scanned it. So a lot of brands will ship in a clear poly bag, not realizing that that means that Amazon is potentially sometimes scanning a barcode they never even intended Amazon to see, and thinking that Amazon's going to be able to pull that apart. So any poly bags, dark gray, black, just make them as opaque as possible so that Amazon doesn't scan anything within the bag rather than the label on the outside of the bag. The next one is prep. So I know that anyone that watches these regularly, it will be like, this girl is obsessed with the prep and packaging dashboard. It's because I am. And it's important to review this for shortages because, again, especially during Q4, anything that needs prep, if it doesn't need that prep, you'll reduce shortages by telling Amazon you don't need to prep it. If it gets to an FC, especially like, towards the end of the day at a really busy deals time and they need to prep it, it's going to go to the side of the FC for whenever someone has time to prep it, not get prepped as it's entered. It's a thing they do to save time. And then a lot of people will say, I didn't even need Amazon to bubble wrap these. But yet you've lost weeks of payment and potentially sales by the fact that Amazon has put them to the side for whenever someone has time to bubble wrap them. The next one, and this is one that actually we only saw as a result of doing so many shortage disputes, is canceled and rescheduled carrier pickups. So one thing that Amazon I don't actually even know how this breaks in their system, but if you have a carrier pickup when it's Amazon's own carrier that is canceled, then you reschedule it and you ship, Amazon will actually sometimes flag that as a shortage. And then when you try and fight it, they'll say the reason they can't pay you is because the carrier pickup never happened. So this kind of speaks to what we'll talk a lot more about later, but the documentation of everything. But wherever possible, stick to the original shipment. And then if you know that, say, for example, Amazon canceled, make sure that you keep those emails very well and filed and easy to get to. A lot of the time, they'll go to a warehouse email address or someone who does need to see them is looking at them, but then just due to the sheer volume at Amazon, of Amazon emails, they'll just be kind of getting rid of them, potentially filing them, or that person moves on, and then you've lost your ability to fight that shortage. The next one is ASN issues. So this is important to always read Amazon's latest guidance on ASN. I know that they changed their labeling requirements about a year ago, and everyone all of a sudden was hit with a lot of ASN chargebacks. There will be a correlation between your no carton content label chargeback and your ASN inaccuracy chargeback and your shortages. They are, I would say, the canary in the coal mine to start looking for shortages if you have high carton content accuracy or high ASN inaccuracy or missing ASN chargebacks, then that's when you need to think, okay, and then what shortages did they lead to? What do we do about that? Then the last one,
really quick before we jump to I think you're going to say the last one. So when we're talking about ASN, is this one of those things that they're updating just within Vendor Central and it's just caught in, a lot of times their vendor agreements say, hey, there's certain things they can update at any time just by posting on Vendor Central. And hey, by the way, I sent you an email, but the email went to the person who set up the account 12 years ago, who's no longer at your company, and it just gets missed.
Yeah, so there's three places you'll find it. One, in the email of the super user, who sometimes that's even a general email. The next place you'll find it is in the news feed. Amazon will put it in the news feed that no one ever really reads. But that's where it appear. And then the place where I always go though is as soon as I see one of these chargebacks, I go and reread the guidance, and often I'll say, "Oh, they updated it and they just didn't tell anybody."
Awesome. All
And
right.
then the last one, as I'm sure everyone's probably exhausted by now, is the volume. So one interesting thing is a lot of the times someone will say, you know, this is my bestseller. We sell them to Amazon thousands at a time. How do we get such big shortages on them? And I say, well, does Amazon have to scan each of them separately? The answer, Nelly, is always yes. If Amazon is scanning many, many thousands of something separately, what they'll do, again, to save time, they may scan some, put the rest to the side, or sometimes they'll know the shipment's coming in, especially if it's small, and they'll just stick it to the side anyway and deal with it when they have more time. So one important thing is if you are selling thousands of the same product packaged together, instead of having Amazon scan every case, invest in license plate receive, invest in setting up your products so that Amazon do one scan and they'll scan 100 at a time, 1,000 at a time, so that they don't have to scan every box. And that, to be honest, will be the biggest shortage saver for you if you're in that position.
Yeah. Awesome. So as we're as we're walking through this, then are there like the number one things that you come in, right? A brand like brings you in to kind of do this overall audit of everything that's going on, operationally. Like, can you walk us through like key steps that you're advising, these vendors to make to kind of prevent, I mean, the idea, right, is to prevent shortages in the first place, right? What are some
Yep.
of those things that people could, take away, from here and say, hey, these are the top things I should be thinking about to get started?
Yeah. So I think that the labeling is potentially the top thing. I always say those shortages don't start in the warehouse, they start in the catalog. Usually it's a catalog error that leads to the most of shortages on Amazon. And then the next thing I would do is I would review the shortages data with a fine-tooth comb. Actually, and excitingly, Amazon has rolled out a new version of financial reports this week. So anyone that doesn't see those financial reports under the payment tab, either if you are the super user, raise a technical ticket. If you are not the super user, ask the super user for permissions. What that allows you to do is it allows you to bulk download your shortages from the finance portal 3 months at a time. So they're not really being transparent about the data. But if you're willing to do it 3 months at a time, you can see all of your shortages invoices in detail. That allows you for the first time ever to say, in a very quick way, okay, these are where our shortages are centered around. It is incredibly rare, and I've done this hundreds of times now, for a brand to not have an 80-20 rule in their shortages. And then from that, you'll start to be able to build a picture, and you'll be able to think, okay, well, it's these 5 ASINs. What's unique about these ASINs? How do we ship them that's specific? Let's go to the warehouse. Let's actually look at their packaging and then essentially work through the causes of shortages that I mentioned. And then as long as you can say, okay, they are packaged 100% correctly on the right side. The packaging is opaque. I'm not asking Amazon to do any prep. We don't schedule shipments or back order these, and then go through that list. And usually you'll get to a part in the list where you say, oh, okay, yeah, that's what's going wrong with these.
Yeah. Awesome. So I'm just going to recap this one. I love it. So we're going to go Vendor Central now. You can download that report. You see what the troubled ASINs are. Then you can do the back, yeah, start in the warehouse or whatever, but make sure that you're doing a complete review. But a lot of times, once you've figured it out, it's actually in the catalog. It's your own fault. Something's been messed up, which totally makes sense with the size of the new item setup forms that they've had forever. Um, and then check all of those because that might be the number one thing that pops up. Before I move on, Christina wrote in a note here, and just again, reminder for everybody: if you have a question, drop into the chat or the Q&A. And this says, "What program and/or method did you say would allow Amazon to not have to scan each item?"
Yeah, so there's two ways to do it. The first one is license plate receive. I can share more information on that, but it's a bit of a heavy lift in terms of rolling that out across your catalog. So you'd want to read the documentation on that very carefully. The second way to do that would be to set up your case pack quantities on your ASINs so that each size of pack had its own EAN/UPC. So say you sell a pack of 10 and the customer gets that pack of 10, but you sell to Amazon 1,000 of them. What license plate receive is, it would enable you to stick one label on the 1,000 so that when Amazon scanned that, it goes through their system as, okay, these are 1,000 individual units to the customer. They break them up and dispute them. They don't have to scan any of them. You can do the same thing with your carton content, whereas you can say to Amazon, we're going to ship to you in case packs of 1,000, 100, however many. And then when we ship to you that way, it will have this barcode, break it down until you get to this barcode, which is the barcode for the each, which is what the customer would get. It's in the catalog part of Vendor Central. All you need to do is get the new EANs, make sure that each layer of packaging, so you know your big pack, then your multi-pack, and then the individual unit, each have an individual EAN and UPC and are each labeled only with that EAN and UPC, and then tell Amazon what the individual is. They will scan it in and then keep breaking it down until they hit that one scannable, this is the unit barcode, and then they'll know, okay, we have 100, like we have 100, 1,000, however many of these, and then take them in all as one.
Yeah. Awesome. Love it. Another question that comes in here, and I was thinking the exact same thing. It says, thanks, Sarah, for dropping this in. What are some catalog error examples that would lead to shortages?
Yeah. So I guess the opposite of what I've just described is a big one, where sometimes brands will ship to Amazon in case packs of 100, but the case pack of 100 will also have the UPC of the individual product on. That's a big one because Amazon will scan it. They'll say, this scan matches to an ASIN that the customer buys, we'll take it in. And all of a sudden, you've shipped 100 to the customer as if it's one. And anyone that has received multiples in the post when they've ordered something, they're not going to say, Amazon, hey, you accidentally shipped me too many. They're in fact just going to say to their family and friends, I have 100 of these. Do you want one? So that's why that issue doesn't often get picked up, but it is a common one. The next one is if your product has multiple UPCs or EANs, but you only share one of them with Amazon. So if you, for example, have told Amazon, this is the EAN, but then when you ship it to Amazon, if it's in consumer packaging, it might have the EAN, the UPC, or potentially different barcodes on it. Every time Amazon scan the barcode, if it's the one you gave to Amazon, great, it's going to go through. If it is the one that you didn't give to Amazon, they're going to get an error and it's going to go with the rest of the shipment to the side of the FC to be picked up whenever. So anything that is scannable, you have to imagine that could be potentially the first one going through. So Amazon need that information. The next actually is, I would say, in the catalog, where you have made or someone else with the ability to make, so anyone that sells to a big distributor, anyone where there's multiple Vendor Central offers, they've made a change to the catalog and you haven't noticed. This can happen sometimes when you launch in a different country and they manage to change the EANs, that can change it in like one of the other marketplaces, and that could cause shortages in another marketplace because Amazon all of a sudden says, that's not the EAN for that product, that's not the UPC, and then it goes to the side. So whilst it is kind of depressing, I like to remind people that the catalog is very much a moving target and should be checked all the time.
Yeah, especially if you're shipping to other retailers. So the case pack and individual unit was an issue that I had in shipping in products. I actually only sold, it was a case of infant formula and I only sold it by the case. It didn't make sense to do it by individuals. But the individual inside had the same UPC because every place else we were shipping this and it's going on store shelf, like nobody in the store shelf put a full case. They all in the back room cracked it open and put individual units on. So it didn't matter that there were two of the same UPCs. But when you get to Amazon, I would sell this whole case. And actually, what happened is when somebody would order, the warehouse fulfillment center staff would crack open the case and they would scan the UPC on the unit and it would match the full case and they would ship an individual unit. Well, then the customer gets one instead of four. And then, then I get an andon cord pulled and then it's trying to unravel everything. The only fix in that case was creating a new unique UPC for the case, which then causes a downstream issue either in your brick and mortar locations where you're selling, either at the receive spot or on the shelf spot. And so if you have to go down that route, I totally understand. It's a pain. If you want to just, you know, have a hash session on it, like I'm more than happy to commiserate with you, I guess, in a way. So another one, here's another issue that I had. Sue says we had this happened a few times this summer where we've disputed a shortage and then get paid for the shortage, but then a few payments later it gets taken out again. Any suggestions to eliminate this from happening? So you dispute it, you get paid, and they come back and they take the money back?
So that is an interesting one. So yeah, I love it when interesting problems like that come up, but cheers to you. That's actually a rare one. What I would wonder on that one is what are they actually taking back? So one thing that they'll sometimes do is they'll pay you for the shortage, but then they'll say, actually, now we've paid you for the shortage, we're charging extra co-op, or now we've paid you for the shortage, we realize that there's a price discrepancy, and then that looks like they're taking it back in that sense. That's very common. To take back actual paid for unit goods is rare, and then usually like without having seen the exact case, that would indicate that they have a misreceiving issue where they think that they're paying you for one ASIN and then they're actually receiving the incorrect ASIN. So what they'll often do is they'll pay you back because they know that they have to submit the goods somewhere, but then they'll think, okay, actually this was an ASIN mismatch. And then they'll try and correct it by rolling it back.
Yeah, awesome. Hey, Sue, I'll connect you with Hannah afterwards and you guys can go do a deep dive. I think that's probably the best way to handle it because it sounds super interesting. And I think you piqued Hannah's interest here. I think she wants to take a look at it as well. So outside of my catalog, my case pack issues, another place where I see the one thing I had to tackle, and I kind of prefaced it earlier, was around ASN. Those issues are always just a pain. Is that what you see as well?
Yep. They're a pain because a lot of the times, usually, the whoever is looking after the e-commerce and whoever's looking after the warehouse and whoever's in IT aren't connected on it. The first thing I say to
So
do
true. Sorry, I'm laughing. It's so true. It's
when
so
you
true.
start to see your chargebacks rise, the first people you should be talking to is IT. And actually, the most important thing you can do is convince them that it is a problem. So nearly everyone is automated, which means that your ASNs will be automated. If you receive an ASN issue, it is an IT problem, not a scheduling problem, not an operational problem. And it's important to make sure that they actually look at it. One thing I would say is that Amazon have several names for what is essentially an ASN issue. Cotton content accuracy, no label, no cotton label, no cotton, essentially anything that involves labels and cottons and the different ways that they put it, it's always an ASN issue and it's always an IT issue.
Totally agree. It's awesome. Any other so vendor catalog? We're thinking like those key steps, vendors take to prevent shortages as a whole. Vendor catalog, case backs, we tackled that. ASNs, like, are there others that you can think that are key?
Actually, so one beyond the packaging, which kind of we discussed, one thing that I would say is the definition of shortages. And this is going to frustrate a lot of people. But Amazon doesn't actually see something as a shortage if they haven't paid you within the payment days. They see something as a shortage if they haven't paid you within 90 days of the last day that they could pay you. So what a lot of brands will do is, okay, it's say you have 90-day payment terms, it's day 91, Amazon haven't paid me, it's a shortage. It is very likely that they are still investigating and don't even truly acknowledge it as a shortage yet. A lot of the times then brands will put in a huge amount of effort pulling the bill of lading, getting the teams to do all the work, only for Amazon to then pay a few days later. I always say that cash flow constraints are a big thing, but leave it as long as you possibly can before you do all of that work to get Amazon to review it, just because a lot of the time Amazon will pay within 90 days of the last day they were supposed to pay you. On that note, whenever you're disputing real-time shortages, my advice is dispute them without the bill of lading the first time. And then a lot of them will be accepted anyway. And then add the bill of lading to the ones that were rejected, just reopen that case and add it then. It'll save you the time in pulling it for all of the ones that were probably going to get paid anyway.
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. I love it. And just a reminder, others, as we're kind of get through the halfway point here, for those of you who have joined, drop questions or comments in the chat or the Q&A, and we'll make sure that we get to them. So as these shortages occur, number one, I didn't know it was another 90 days. So you can be out 180.
That's what
Like if
we've
your
seen.
payment terms are, 90 days, it can be another 90 on top of that.
Yep.
Okay. Um, that's crazy. But I mean, it's Amazon, right? So I mean, I think people stopped shaking their heads to Amazon a few years back. So when you think about shortages are going to occur, that they just are. That's just the reality of doing business on the 1P side with Amazon. Like, what are the first things, like, in your mind a vendor should do to identify like that root cause? Again, I want to keep rehashing this because I think we went through it a little bit. But that's another question that I had originally, but also just came in over email, and then I think we have another question in the chat here. But what are those first things you need to do when you start seeing these shortages pop up?
Yeah. So there's three pieces of data that I always pull. I look at how are my chargebacks trending. So not necessarily what they are, but how are they trending? Are they flat? Are they up? Are they down? If they are up, it often indicates that you have a new issue. Whereas if they are flat or down, it indicates that you have a systemic issue, something that's been there from the beginning. A new issue, usually it's going to be IT, potentially you've rolled out a new type of packaging, maybe you've even got a new printer and it's not printing correctly. But that would indicate, think about changes that have happened in the past few months, and it's going to be there. If your chargebacks are flat or down, what then you want to look at is your pretty much lifetime data of your shortages and look at your common ASINs, your common FCs, and your common fulfillment types. The reason I say fulfillment types is because sometimes you'll have a vendor code issue, which can lead to shortages. It's not unheard of for sales, unfortunately, to be attributed to the incorrect vendor. I actually had a brand where Amazon just didn't pay for any of their stuff for a year. And one, I said, wow, I can't believe you had the cash flow to wait a year to bring this problem up. But two, it looks like someone else has been assigned your vendor code. So that's why I say, looking at the fulfillment type, get as much data as you can, and then look for the common themes within that data. Then once you've got the common themes within that data, absolutely pick apart those ASINs or those POs and say, is everything absolutely perfect on these? Another good place to look is if there's anything that you can't see. So a lot of the times people will say, oh yeah, I feel like there is a problem with the catalog, but this product hasn't reflected correctly for a while. Amazon's technical ticket on their support in Vendor Central is fantastic. They act very quickly. They actually do fix things. So if you ever think, I wish I could look at this catalog, but it's not reflecting, don't hesitate to do a technical ticket. And then once you look at that data as an aggregate, you'll start to pick out the key themes. The last piece of data, once you've got your key themes, is to look at your previously disputed shortages. And what's more important than accepted is look at where it was rejected. And that kind of shows an outstanding issue. So if something was a shortage and then it was accepted, that's almost like saying, for whatever reason, Amazon could have been busy that day. Amazon just isn't very good at taking it in. There are slower FCs than others. But if you find a key theme, or it's this ASIN or it's this vendor code, and they'll once we dispute those, they still get rejected, that's when you can be certain that it's something wrong, essentially with the catalog or with the packaging, that's causing Amazon not to be able to take these in.
Awesome. So a few more questions rolling in here. One, so if I understand correctly, you shouldn't dispute a shortage until 90 days after they were supposed to pay the invoice.
I think that they make you dispute it sooner than that. I think it's around about 30 days, although they are changing the guidance on that pretty much as we speak, and have been over the past 14 days. But I wait until the very last minute to dispute an invoice. That I wait as long as I can, just because a lot of it's going to get paid anyway. It's just to save the finance team time.
Okay. Awesome. The next question around here is around inventory management. How important is accurate inventory management in preventing shortages, and what are some best practices? I think
Yeah.
tons of
So
inventory issues over the past few years.
uh it's an interesting one because there's two types of inventory management. There is your side and there is Amazon's side. On your side, it won't help too much, but the most important part is keeping accurate data. A lot of the time, actually, we'll dispute shortages for brands all the way back to 2021. And Amazon will say, yes, we approve these, we don't approve these. And then they'll say, well, why didn't they approve these? And I will say, well, this invoice looks questionable. Can we look into the data and say whether or not this was 100% shipped to Amazon? And then sometimes brands will say, actually, we don't keep anything that was that old, or, oh, that person left. So thinking about preserving your data on your side, I would say, I think it's part of inventory management because it's all about the cataloging of everything. Keep it for as long as possible. Amazon let you go back pretty much 3 years. So you should be keeping everything at least 3 years, probably 4 if it was me, but I'm a belt and braces person. On Amazon's side, keeping track of what they say they have in inventory is very useful. We will often say, actually, you've sold out more than you've paid for, and that triggers them to go and investigate what they've actually paid for. But you need the data to be able to say that.
Awesome. Can you explain the process for disputing recent shortages and what documentation or evidence is typically required?
Yeah, so
And others, if you have questions, keep dropping them in the chat in the Q&A. We'll get to them.
that's an exciting one if you are an Amazon invoicing nerd like me. Amazon have actually recently changed it. They used to say POD, so proof of delivery, and they would mean that you needed to submit a hard copy of the invoice, you needed to submit a packing slip, and you needed to submit a bill of lading. They have recently come out and straight out said what they've been edging around for years is that they don't take into account the bill of lading unless it's special circumstances, which is why I say submit it without it, like the first time, and see how it goes, especially if you've waited as long as you can payment days wise. But then when you do submit it, you don't need to do the packing slip anymore. You don't need to do the invoice anymore. All you need to do now is submit the bill of lading, which most people actually have on hand. The next one that you might be required to submit is any ASN records that you can. So oftentimes, if it's not the bill of lading that Amazon want, they'll say it's because of a missing ASN. That's something that, again, you need to link up with finance because they will be able to get you the return confirmation of the ASN. But most people that work, they're head of e-commerce potentially in the company, they don't have like kind of they don't actually have access to that, let alone kind of know where it is.
Yeah, I just the proof of delivery thing going away. I mean, especially if Amazon was picking up, and then they don't require a signature at the end, and they're like, "Hey, give me the proof of delivery." Like you don't require it. That happened all the time. So now they're just at bill of lading.
Yep.
That is awesome. Are there, if we think about like the older shortages, because you were just talking a little bit about stuff that's like, older, maybe 4 years old, 3 years old, how far back does that go? And then what are the typical like processes or challenges or first steps that vendors need to take when they're really old shortages as a whole?
Yeah, so right now, the oldest we are disputing is early 2021. We haven't been able to get back to 2020, unfortunately. So that kind of gives a semblance of time scale. However, Amazon, unlike Co-op, don't have a specific written down time scale. So they will say, we think this is too old sometimes, but then this on the same case, different brand, they'll say, oh yeah, we're totally happy to talk about this. So I always say go as old as you have the data for and try to dispute those. The next and to speak to that, it's lacking own data, which I previously mentioned. Keep everything, absolutely everything to do with Amazon. You never know when you're going to need it. That includes their emails that they send to you. Sometimes, for example, they will send an email saying, we're canceling this PO, even though you've already shipped it. That is a very important email because beyond that email, there is no evidence on Vendor Central that you shipped it, that they canceled it after you shipped it. So that's the kind of thing where Amazon say, well, this is of course a shortage because this was canceled. And that's when you could say, no, actually, it became a shortage on your side. Then you thought you weren't getting it because you never received it properly. Then you canceled it. So timings don't reflect on Vendor Central very well, which means that you need to be control of the timeline. You need to keep that data. The next one is a big one, and that's if you've previously changed staff. So Aaron and I were talking at the top of the call, staff are changing a lot right now. It's important to remember that once someone's Vendor Central account is gone, so once you delete them, no one else can have access to the tickets that they raised. The payment disputes, yes, but the troubleshooting tickets, the contact us tickets, people call them different things. If they were the only person on them, they're gone. No one can access them anymore. It's not on the account like it is on Seller Central. So always have a succession plan for staff. Always make sure they write and keep everything. And then I always say, as a rule of thumb, make a general e-commerce at email and make sure that is always CC'd on everybody's tickets as a matter of course, so that there is a repository where you can see every piece of exchange you've had with Amazon. And then the last thing that I say is know that when it gets to bulk shortages or aged shortages, it's more of a negotiation than anything else. A lot of brands think that, oh, we're hitting our heads against the wall with Amazon. What is important to think of is, okay, what can we say to Amazon to get them to understand, to get them to get on our side? As an example, sometimes they'll say, this was a carrier shortage because you didn't have a carrier appointment. That's oftentimes I'll say, well, actually, this was a partial paid invoice. So if you're saying that there was no appointment, how did you receive the first half of it? And kind of think about it more of a negotiation than straight up, we want the money, Amazon, no, you can't have it, and less confrontational and more factual.
Yeah, I think I think a golden nugget there is having a general, right, e-commerce, right? Company name, e-commerce at companyname.com and CCing it on everything. Because that's it. I mean, you're going to go back, right? At some point in time, you're going to have to go back and you have to harvest this stuff back out. And to have a central repository is just fantastic. Yeah. Are there other things that are popping up? Are there tools? Like, I just think like Amazon over time slowly is listening to brands, not the rate that we wish they were. But like you mentioned, I think there's a new financial report that's out there. Is that like the top tool for finding this? And then where do people go find it?
Yeah, so that is in the payments tab, a new one, financial reports. Right now it's got a dark dot next to it, which makes it quite easy to spot. So yep, that's the new financial reports. It's quite good in that it lets you bulk download data, which we've never been able to do before. What they do though, that is very exciting, is that your report type right now is a drop down. There's only one thing there, but when Amazon does a drop down, it means there's going to be more data. So watch that space, learn how it works now, and then when more interesting reports come out, that'd be great. One other thing that Amazon launched truly a couple of weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, is their shortages redispute tool. So I think it's going to be great going forward. Right now, it really is not, as most Amazon new launches. What it lets you do is it lets you redispute aged shortages 10 at a time through the dispute tool rather than through the ticket system, which we need to use right now. That's great because you can do them endlessly, so you don't hit a dead end. However, it does mean that you get rejected more. So I think Amazon is hoping to exhaust people. I'm not sure. It's going to create a lot more churn, but it does create a lot more hope in the sense that shortages don't just shut down. You're at the end of the road. You can keep going after them and after them and after them.
What are the most common mistakes that you see that, I mean, you do this all the time, but you also come in when brands are at the point where they're just, tired of hitting their head in the wall. Like you step in, like what are the most common mistakes that you see vendors making when disputing shortages? And how can they avoid them, I guess?
I think people do too much work up front. So sometimes they'll say, hey, we pulled everything, we shared everything with Amazon, and they didn't look at it. One, we're exhausted, and two, we don't know where to go from here. Do as little as work up front as possible, especially if you're close to the end of the payment days, because Amazon's probably going to find a lot of it anyway. The second is never say to yourself, okay, I've already submitted the bill of lading to Amazon, so I'm not going to submit it again. Always keep resubmitting it. The sad truth is you might get someone on the other side of the ticket that isn't trained to do it. Potentially they're covering for someone that day. So don't think we've submitted it, they've rejected it, that's the end. Always resubmit your evidence every time you dispute or redispute or raise a ticket with Amazon. Assume that this is the person looking at your case for the first time fresh ever. And assume, unfortunately, that they probably don't know as much about the dispute system as you do. So you're going to have to walk them through it. The next one is don't always accept Amazon's first answer. So a lot of the times Amazon will come back and say, we were able to locate $100,000 worth of stock. Sorry that's only 40% of what you asked for. At that point, it becomes a negotiation. A lot of the times Amazon will try these tactics where they say, oh, you need to accept, or we're going to take the offer back in 2 days, or you need to accept it. I'm going to shut this ticket down on X date. Don't stress about it. Do not let them push you into agreeing to anything. Ultimately, this is money that they owe to you. And the fact that they're making an offer is them admitting they know they owe it to you. They are not going to shut the ticket down at random without letting you open it up again. They are not going to hold to some arbitrary date in the future. So take your time, make sure you're happy with it, and don't feel like Amazon's pressuring you into a certain date, which is what they try and do. The next one is brands will often try and keep to a calendar year. So they'll say, I want to close out 2023. I want to close out 2022. Unfortunately, beyond their statute of limitations, so co-op, it's trailing 24 months. Shortages, it's pretty gray in the US. It's always open. So my advice is to keep it open as well, because if you close it down and Amazon hasn't closed it down, it means that you could be potentially blindsided when you think you've closed 2023 and then Amazon give you charges or shortages against that year. So try and stick to Amazon's timescales because, they're the bigger guy in the ring. The other one is not picking your timing well. So you want to work kind of inverse to what Amazon do. What we've noticed is it seems to be the same team is dealing with promotions acceptance, auditing, shortage disputes, and then all other types of disputes. They audit, usually they have a rolling audit, but they do 2 big audit pushes, one at the start of the year and one in the middle of the year. Q4 is the deals time. There is a lift for Prime Day in the summer. don't raise your disputes during these times, is in your big disputes that don't need to be raised straight away. Raise them outside of these times, because that's when the team are free to actually look at your work. You'll get a faster response, and you'll probably get a more high level person or experienced person looking at it, that if you, for example, raised it in Q4 because your year end is coming up, you're just going to get the first person that sees it, because they're split between trying to do an audit and trying to approve some deals. And then the last thing is not keeping enough evidence. There is absolutely no piece of information that you'll receive from Amazon that is arbitrary. Make sure it's all correlated by PO number and searchable and stored.
Awesome. I guess we have time maybe for one or two more questions. How long does the shortage dispute process typically take? That's a huge one. So let's tackle that one first,
Yeah.
and then
So
kind of get to the last one. Yeah.
cool. The rule of thumb is 3 months. And what I'm talking about though is the old age shortages process. It used to take around 3 months. I don't know how it's going to go with Amazon's very, very brand new off the presses tool. But I will expect it will lengthen it. So I always say to imagine 3 or 6 months to get your age shortages back.
Awesome. Right. The next question, as we kind of get to the end here, when you think about it, I think everybody's planning for next year, obviously sales and all that other stuff, but also what is the process? What do the operations look like? And so, how can vendors, think about future proofing if we think about 2025, basically to harbor against shortages, especially, I mean, we're in the middle of it. We're Q4 right now, and you're just kind of highlighting like beginning of the year, middle of the year, there's Q4, like how do people like future proof their operations as a whole? Any advice there?
Yeah, so I would audit everything that I mentioned above in terms of look back at your past shortages, identify the themes, identify whether it's a new or long-standing issue. I would plan to do that audit in January, Feb, with the idea that I was going to submit my evidence to Amazon in March, when they don't really have that much going on with that team. There's no deals, there's no audits going on for them at that time, because so you'll get looked at first. So that's how I usually plan it. If you are getting a huge amount of shortages and you just don't know what to do, whilst you are gathering all this evidence and submitting it, you may want to turn on Dropship. Dropship have significantly less, so about a tenth of the shortages that DI and EDI/API have. So potentially turning on Dropship while you fix a shortages problem does at least stop the bleeding, and it gives you some breathing space. And then I always make shortages a company-wide issue. So wherever I've got my shortage analysis, I will get together the operations team and the IT team with the kind of e-commerce catalog, different companies call it different things team. And then I talk through and I say, I'm going to talk you through the findings. Stop me at any point and say, oh yeah, we did have a problem with this PO, or oh yeah, we always have a problem with this EAN, or actually we did an IT change on this date. So if you show them the raw data, oftentimes it's those people that will be able to give you the context that you're missing when you're sitting in your office looking at it on a spreadsheet.
Yeah. Awesome, Hannah. Well, that was a blast. As we kind of wrap up here, everybody, I would encourage you to have a follow-up conversation with Hannah and the team over at the Hawkers Club. They're all around great friends, partners, supporters of the network, working with a ton of brands in it. Worth having that conversation. Just have them do an audit about what's going on, and then put them in your Rolodex to ping. They also, great work, and just is Amazon Advisors as a whole. As an agency, if you have any questions around direct import, there's literally some of the smartest people around. So I'd encourage you to have that follow-up conversation with them. Also, look for a follow-up email from me. I would love to have a conversation with you. More than happy to share what I'm hearing across the network as a whole, newest strategies, trends, partners, how Q4 is looking already. Would love to set aside some time and pick your brain and allow you to pick mine. And with that, I think, Hannah, any like key takeaways as we wrap up here?
Look at the data, and don't get stressed out when Amazon's new shortages tool rejects all of your inputs. Keep trying with it.
Yeah, awesome. And if you're in Midtown on the 12th of December, let us know. We're doing a full day event there. With that, we're going to wrap up. Thanks again, Hannah, for everything. And everybody take care, stay safe, and look forward to having you on a future event. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you.